Do you know why it's so important to have a strong market of competition? Whether we're talking about CPUs, automobiles, GPUs, ISPs, or in this case, web browsers. Because without competition, one company can just run amok doing pretty much anything they want. And it seemed like that would be the case for JPEG XL, which Cloudinary made a really good case for back on November of 2022. If you have no idea about this image format, I highly recommend you go and read this, but the TLDR is things like lossless JPEG recompression, taking an existing JPEG image, recompressing it, losing none of the quality, and the size gets smaller because it's a more efficient way to store an image. Progressive decoding. So as you download an image, it actually can show you a low resolution version of that image, and then as more data is downloaded, it can show you a higher and higher res version. And as for lossless compression, it is a lot more efficient than things like PNG, among a bunch of other points being made, which I highly recommend you read. But Google is Google, and if there is one thing that Google is really good at, it is ending projects prematurely that they had a hand in creating. They were part of the committee that made JPEG XL, and they removed support for it in version 1.10. Stating, and I quote, "Experimental flags and code should not remain indefinitely." Yes, but they're experimental because it's still being worked on. There is not enough interest from the entire ecosystem to continue experimenting with JPEG XL. Okay, we'll get to that. The new image format does not bring sufficient incremental benefits over existing formats to warrant enabling it by default. And by removing the flag and the code in version 1.10, it reduces the maintenance burden and allows us to focus on improving existing formats in Chrome. Actually, it allows you to go work on another format that we're interested in that is completely unrelated, but that's a whole nother thing, it's a whole separate video. But they're completely right, there wasn't that much ecosystem interest. Only small indie companies were interested, companies you've probably never really heard of, like Intel, Meta, Nvidia, Adobe, Mozilla, Critter, and a bunch of other organizations that, who's really heard of them? But now, another small indie company has jumped on board, that being Apple. Back in June, when WWDC 2023 happened, a couple of people noticed this about Safari. Did Apple just announce that Safari will be adding JPEG XL support? Great news. So they have this giant list or wall of text, whatever you want to call it, and one of the things on here, JPEG XL. But it wasn't just Safari it was being added to. Over here we have news from WWDC, WebKit features in Safari 17 beta, and if we go all the way down to the section on JPEG XL is definitely happening, but JPEG XL will be supported by WebKit for Safari 17, Safari View Controller, and WK WebKit WebView on macOS Sonoma, macOS Ventura, and macOS Monterey, as well as on iOS, iPadOS, watchOS, and visionOS. So basically, after this update shipped, JPEG XL is supported on the entire Apple platform, and not just with first-party applications. Third-party developers can also make use of JPEG XL. Currently, Safari 17 is in beta, nothing is shipped to the general public yet, but it is absolutely going to be in this version. Maybe you could argue the 20% market share that Safari has isn't enough to convince Google to actually do something. They are by far the second biggest web browser, but it's still only 20%. But now if you add in the smartphone market share, the tablet market share, and the smartwatch market share, all of a sudden, it seems like there is a lot of people that can make use of JPEG XL. And it seems like Google is kind of the outlier here because you have the Apple platform supporting it, all of these different companies that want to make use of JPEG XL, and it's just Google that's saying, no, we're not gonna do that. And so often do we see Apple having a giant influence on the rest of the tech industry. For better or worse, things like getting rid of the headphone jack, sealing up your phone so nothing can be replaced except by a repair person, having the notch, and all of these other things which you may or may not like, but regardless, when Apple does something, it tends to ripple out to the rest of the industry. And if you have this platform supporting JPEG XL alongside these companies that already want to use it, all of a sudden it looks really bad for Google to not just add support for it. And adding this support didn't go unnoticed by various outlets. It got a couple of forum posts, it got a couple of Reddit posts, maybe a video or two here and there, but I don't really remember hearing about it when it first happened. I found out about this a little bit more recently, but all of this stuff is kind of surprising considering how Apple generally is when it comes to adopting standards that other people want to be using. It took them about, I think, like 8 to 10 years to finally adopt WebP. But in this case, I don't know if it's like to spite Google or what the deal is. They are like the front runners here. With all that in mind, a new issue was created on the Chromium issue tracker. Request reopen JPEG XL issue. Hello. JPEG XL support issue was closed as won't fix because of perceived low interest in the ecosystem. Very heavy emphasis on perceived. Since then, things have changed, and Apple announced JPEG XL support in their Safari browser. This is very important because it changes the base assumption about low interest in ecosystem for JPEG XL. It's no longer true when the second biggest browser is adding support. I guess they could have justified it at the time because no other browser had support for it. Yes, there was support at the OS level, there was support for tooling, but they were the only browser that had it. Even ignoring Safari, there are other browsers that support it now, but Safari is obviously the biggest one. This is a radical new development that fully justifies reopening the original discussion about adding JPEG XL in Chromium. This thread hasn't had a ton of attention, but it has had some attention from some Chromium developers. And are you ready for the most mind-numbing conversation you will ever see? Let's have a look. Could you please provide input on this issue? Adding into CC list, issue seems related to this bug here. This is the bug where everything was first reported with the original JPEG XL stuff. Yes, it is definitely related. Thanks. People reply with other things, not really that important. Could you please provide your update as per comment 4? If there is no response, issue may get closed after 30 days. Thanks. This is that same person from before. And this is the OP. Yes. This issue is directly related to that previous bug. It was closed as won't fixed because of low interest in the ecosystem. But since then, things have changed. Apple added support for JXL, which means that in near future, the adoption of this format will increase to CCA 20%. I'm not sure what CCA stands for in this case. Safari market share. Increase of adoption to 20% is important news that justifies reopening of the original issue and new discussion about possibility of adding JXL to Chromium. I believe reopening this bug for new discussion shouldn't be a problem. Thanks. All seems reasonable so far. Let's keep going. Could you please confirm the OS details? Thanks. What? Did you look at the bug report this was connected to? The OS is not related. This is an issue about reopening another issue. The bug here is to get another issue reopened, which was the non-platform specific implementation of a feature. The OS of the reporter is very clearly not relevant, and this just looks like malicious compliance. Hopefully it is just an oversight, happens to the best of us, rather than being voluntarily antagonistic. OS is irrelevant for this issue, but my OS is Windows 10 if that helps. As was already said, all you need to do is reopen this bug. As the issue seems similar to this bug here, the bug that everybody is on the same page that we are talking about, adding Fershing to CC list for more inputs. What do you mean it seems similar? Everybody here is just saying, open up the previous bug. Like, is this the account of an actual human? I really don't think so, because who responds like that? Like, yes, of course it seems similar, because that's what we're talking about. Anyway, the only positive response we've gotten is setting status to untriaged and requesting someone from respective dev team to look into this for further updates. Thanks. That's not talking about the one that we actually care about. This is still marked as won't fix closed. That's talking about this one. So maybe there'll be some discussion about it in the future? Possibly. I don't know. Maybe we'll wait for Safari 17 to come out for developers to actually start using it, and then think about whether we want to talk about JPEG XL again. And from that point, nothing has really been said. It's just a couple of other people, and you have the original OP here. I hope this issue will be quickly resolved, and the bug that we want to be reopened will be reopened for further discussion. JPEG XL support in other software is growing rapidly. I'm repeating myself, but reason for closing this bug was not enough interest from the entire ecosystem. This was proven false by Safari adopting JPEG XL. The reason is no longer valid, so it's reasonable to reopen the original JPEG XL issue for additional discussion and consideration. I've seen a couple of outlets and a couple of people saying that this is Google reconsidering opening up the JPEG XL issue. That's not exactly the case. It's more like they are reconsidering opening it. They are bringing people in to discuss whether they should reconsider opening it, and then if they decide they should reconsider opening it, then they will reconsider opening it. That probably made no sense, and that was the point. So Google has not commented on the main thread basically since everything was closed. People have been saying, hey guys, can we actually get this reopened? Like, can we hear something here? Just even saying it's absolutely never going to happen. Just some sort of response, and it seems like, they're just not doing so. And so far, it's been doing a pretty good job. If you just leave people alone and don't say anything about it, eventually they're going to get bored. But the problem is because the rest of the ecosystem is adopting it, there are always extra things jogging people's memory. So people just keep coming back to this thread, asking Google to do something. My hope is that once Safari 17 moves out of beta, it's available on all of these Apple platforms and developers can actually use it. I hope that the pressure on Google gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Not just people saying in an issue tracker, hey, please add this because Apple is doing it and all of these companies want to make use of it and all of these users want to make use of it, but companies that have direct contact with Google and direct contact with these engineers saying, hey guys, come on, hurry it up, add the feature that everyone wants you to add already. Alongside that, hopefully some demand in the Android ecosystem as well. Now, it's really rare that I say this, but props to Apple for actually doing something good. Now, I am not convinced for a second that they are doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They've clearly done some internal testing and realized that JPEG XL was going to be really useful for their use case. But either way, it doesn't matter what reason they're doing it for, because their interests align with my interests, so I might as well take advantage of them. But what do you think? Do you care about JPEG XL? Do you think it matters that Apple is adding it? Or just the fact that Firefox and GNOME Web now have support, that's all that really matters? I would love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out Patreon, subscribe, Pay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and take a bite of an apple.